Hi, this is Hugh Herndon with the Teacher Mentor Podcast, and today I'm joined with Amanda Neff, who for 11 years was with Pasco County Schools as a secondary English teacher. She currently is a content specialist for Ancora. Hi, Amanda.
Hi.
Hi. So I wanted to talk to you. I wanted to talk to you today about teacher retention, because one of the common themes that I'm trying to establish with the podcast is trying to retain teachers in a profession that is fraught with challenges. Many of the challenges are not even something that the system itself can handle. So even if you wanted more of an income or you wanted more control over your curriculum or your class, that's not even something that as an administrator at a site that they could even really give you. And perhaps to some degree, even at a district level, there's constraints that they have, so budgetary or what have you. So let's start back with why you got into public education to begin with, and what did you hope to get out of teaching high school English?
So I was one of those kids who wanted to be a teacher from early on. It was kind of always what I wanted. When I remember in middle school, I had a teacher who just retired this past weekend. Shout out to Miss Floyd. Anyway, she asked us what we wanted to be, and I said, I want to be a teacher. And she said, don't do it. And I said, oh. She said, you're too smart for that. I said, oh, but I did it. Went right to high school, went right from high school to USF, 4 years in their program, right out, got a job right away, did all the things. It was always what I wanted. And I loved it. And, I wanted to work at a middle school because I'm a weird person, and I thought high schoolers would be mean, which is probably why I taught freshmen for most of my career. But I loved it. It was everything that I wanted to make a difference. I love reading. I have a background in theater, so it was kind of a combination of those skills. I love writing, all that stuff. I loved working with kids. I loved the idea that I could help mold our future society by making an impact. And 4 years in, I won Teacher of the Year, so I was doing something right. And then, I felt like I was a really good teacher. I had a lot going for me. I loved my school, loved my coworkers, but relatively quickly, I started to catch on that every year was a little bit worse. Things that people would say, oh, it'll get better. Or the thing people always used to say was the pendulum will swing back. The pendulum's swinging this way, but it'll swing back. And it never swung back. It only seemed to get worse. I had my son right before COVID.
Okay.
And so I decided to take that year off. So to stay with him. Then I went back for a year post-COVID, and I couldn't do it anymore. I just didn't have it anymore. So then I quit. But yeah.
Right.
Getting ahead of myself, sorry.
No, that's fine. I'm jotting it down notes because I wanted to, when you said that you always had the desire to teach, I think when I come across individuals that say they want to teach or they want to go into high school, which has happened more frequently than in years past, and I don't know why. I think there is a common, I don't know, I think education appeals to those people that like education, right? So if you were somewhat good in school, you like school, then it would make sense that you would want to. But I think for some individuals, it's a false notion of what work and life is like. Like as a student, they're like, oh, that must be cool to be a teacher. And I said jokingly, right? But it's dangerous because individuals think that they're going to go into the system that they're going to go change, or they're going to, everyone walks in, or not everyone. I walked in thinking it's Dead Poet Society, and the reality was it
Oh,
was 8 Mile. So it's like, oh, okay, right. So instead of
so maybe
Byron, instead of
that should
Byron,
be
it's a
the
black
question.
jacket. Like, okay, all right, so that's what it is,
Yeah.
right?
I think
So
that should be your question from now on then, is what movie inspired you to become a teacher? Because if you were thinking Dead Poet Society, my movie was Dangerous Minds
okay, there you
with
go.
Michelle
All right,
Pfeiffer. So I
yeah,
went in with a more realistic view, I think.
yeah,
That if I buy the
probably.
candy bars, I can get them to care.
Probably, as long as it's not Freedom Riders. I can't stand that movie. Okay.
Oh, Hillary Swank.
Yes, but she left Patrick Dempsey. I mean, she left
I,
McDreamy. She left McDreamy for a bunch of students that were eventually going to move on. Does anyone else
he
not
was
see
not
that?
McDreamy in that movie, though. He was kind of a jerk.
Okay. All right.
But that's a
We're
whole
getting
other
we're,
podcast.
that's another podcast. Coming soon. No. Um, so the reason I caution students, or when students say I want to teach, it's because I don't know what their mindset is when they make that decision. Like, is it because I want to relive the glory days of my high school, like re-envisioned, as now I'm the teacher, and which is which is not an accurate way to kind of frame education. And I was wondering, when you were in school, in college, what was the mindset that they put for the College of Ed? Because I was in the College of Ed major, so I was English major, and then I had to do everything as I was learning to actually teach. So I would go take the alternative certification courses, right? So a year and a half into teaching, right, they're teaching me how to use the grade book now, because it didn't really matter how you took the courses. And so I'm like, well, this is way before onboarding. You're like, that probably would have been helpful like in August 2 years ago, but
Yeah. And there's a lot of
but
that in education.
yeah, there's a lot of that. And so I wonder, because I supervise interns and graduate or undergraduate, and I'm still surprised sometimes about the mentality that they come in and they see students. And I think for a lot of them, they think they're going to have, I don't know, like just the quiet, proper little children, like an AP, because that's what they were. And then they come in and they see all of the kids, and it's like, oh my gosh, like this is what it's like. There's 34 of them. I'm like, yes, and they're like the varying levels of capability, or and everything like this. And so I wonder, for you, do you think the College of Education, I don't know, fostered a realistic perspective of what school was like, or do you think it was a little bit both?
So a lot to unpack there. I think similar to, you don't know what it's like to be a parent until you're a parent. You don't know
Okay.
what it's like to be a teacher until you're a teacher. I do think the College of Ed tries. I went to USF, go Bulls. And things like doing the practicum, the hands-on in-class experience is always going to be more beneficial than reading a textbook about teaching.
Yeah.
I'm sure you also have read a million different professional development books, and all their examples and all their things, the kids sound like perfect little angels from some classroom in Connecticut, and it's just not real. It's not what you face on a day-to-day, because it's just a whole other experience to be in there. I
Let
think,
me interrupt. And as a side note, most of the secondary ed people, when we get the books, it's always targeted at primary. So the very first book I read in high school was Harry Wong's First Day of School, and I'm like, why am I reading something? And there were some classroom management principles that are accurate, but it's like some of this is just geared for 5 and 6-year-olds, and I can't really translate that to a guy who just got paroled and is 18. Like, that just doesn't really carry as much weight.
And I will say a lot of people, I think, are big, if you can do classroom management, then you can teach anything. proponents, which I think is why his book is so popular, is because
Yeah.
it's getting those basic, you need to establish your routines, procedures, whatever, and then you can do everything else, which has some merit. Absolutely.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But then when it comes to teaching the actual curriculum, no, there's not a lot, there's not a lot out there. And I think that, and this is off topic again, but I don't care, but I think that might be because the idea of teaching in high school is that by the time the kids get to you, it's more of an exploration of content as opposed to still teaching, we're still teaching phonics in high school.
Yeah.
And because there's such deficits early on, we're having to do a lot of the same things that they were doing. So I don't know. But
well, the state of Florida, I think is requiring now secondary English teachers to get a reading certification. And in full disclosure, I just said, you know what, I'm going to go in there and try it, right? And completely bombed it because it's all phonics. It's all it's like first grade, second grade, how to teach someone to read, and I'm that's not my wheelhouse. Like I assume that you're at least a low level reader coming in, that the alphabet, how the sounds work, word construction to some degree. But to be on a test where I have to know how to do that with a target audience of 9th, 10th, 11th, or 12th graders in mind, it's just like, okay, this
tough.
Yeah.
Because in one hand, they're like, yeah, we need you to be able to do that stuff. And it's like, yeah, if I have kids in my class who don't know how to do basic reading, I obviously want to be able to help them. But then in the next sentence to say, also, you need them to read the Odyssey and Shakespeare. It's like.
in 5 weeks. In 5 weeks.
In 5 weeks. So it's like, well, I can focus on that. But then, there's the other side of it. So yeah, it's tough. And I do think, I think even the general public don't have an understanding of what it's like to teach high school right now. What kids know and don't know, and what deficiencies there are, and what struggles there are. Because I mean, kids nowadays have access to unlimited information, and they can and are experts in certain things. But when it comes to some of the basic stuff, there's a lot of deficits that are hard to overcome.
Oh, there's a huge amount of deficits. And I'm jumping around like you are. I was writing down.
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. Post-COVID, because I think when the kids came back after COVID, it revealed a lot of structural or institutional challenges that they were dealing with. I mean, the school systems, I would say, nationwide just were not ready for distance learning at that scale.
Yeah.
And there are numerous stories to support that. But when it came to the student being responsible for their own education in that year and a half, or 2 years, depending on where you were at, they just didn't have the desire, the capacity, both, intrinsic, extrinsic motivation to do it. And so they come back into the classroom, and the deficit was just so severe, so stark, and we're still paying the price of those, of those years that were just lost. Yeah. And I was wondering, do you think that the post-COVID kind of accelerated a lot of the teachers' frustration? Like, we understood, you were talking about the pendulum. I'm sure when you first started teaching, your perception of student capacity was like maybe here, and then every year it kind of got a little bit less, and maybe it kind of fluctuated within a range, but it was pretty much here. And by year 11, it's kind of down here, and you're going, okay. And then COVID comes in, and now not only is the skills there, but there's this will mentality. It's like, I'll just do it online. They're going, you're not going to do it online. You're going to go home. You're going to play Fortnite until 2 a.m. because your parents are going to tell you to go to bed. And they're going to come in at 6 a.m. and you're going to sleep. And you're going to tell me, Mr. Herndon, I'm going to work on it when I get home. And it's just like a vicious cycle of lies.
Yeah.
And so do you think that post-COVID, it just kind of accelerated the frustration for the teachers, like the burnout? Like this would have happened like over time, 10, 15 years maybe, but suddenly it's just like a quantum leap to the like, okay, I'm out.
Yeah, I definitely think it exasperated things. I had my own little like epiphany a little while ago of, it's not just that teaching was hard. It was always getting harder. I expect that, like you said, I probably would have burnt out no matter what, but that trauma of COVID, of being home with a newborn during COVID, of all the other things that I went through during that time, and then going back to the classroom and having things be so different. And so there was a major shift in behavior, in attitude, I was a great teacher, I feel. But in that year, I ran out of options on things. Yeah. I'm like, I can't teach the way I did because things are so different behavior wise. And yeah, it was too much for me. So I definitely think COVID, that whole experience, the mental load of it, the trauma of it, was the tipping point. But I mean, also, it is such a nice, COVID showed us how resilient we are and how impactful teachers can be. Because I know we got really creative with some of the things we did in those last how many months of school was it? We had like 3 months of school that last year.
Yeah. You mean when we went into lockdown?
When we went into lockdown originally.
Yeah, spring break, and then it just continued.
Yeah. I mean, everything from how far we went to get graduation, the signs and everything. Like, I don't know. Anyway, it was a dark period, but it was also, I think it really showed parents. Well, I hope it showed parents just how hard our job can be. I just think that they also had a short memory of that, and it's already kind of been forgotten.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think I think a lot of times it's easy to overlook the relational aspect of it that we try to have with our students. Mm-hmm. And COVID was a prime example of that, when you're trying to sometimes create a relationship. Like if you were teaching during that year when it was virtual, you're trying to create a relationship digitally, which is not going to work. It's not going to have that same effect. So then you have all the behaviors. I wanted to ask you about the behavioral aspect of it, because that's one thing that I think sometimes the new teachers, or the new to the profession, or those that are in the program, are surprised sometimes, is the behavioral tendencies of students, regardless of, honors, not honors, AP, or, like, kids are kids. And so I wanted to ask you behaviorally, like, what did you observe as a behavior shift that was pressing for you? I've got some thoughts. I just wanted to see what yours are.
Yeah. The audacity of certain things has certainly grown. I feel like a lot of, and I'm not crazy old, I'm a millennial, but I remember even in my early years thinking, oh my God, I would never do that in front of a teacher, or I would never say that in front of a teacher, from back when I was a student, and basing that on what I experienced, not just in my own behavior, but with other students. They would never have done that. But I think that as time has gone on, big things that drive where to start? Big pet peeves of mine, I'll say. Number one is things like they'll constantly talk, and then you'll say, please stop talking. And then the response is always, I wasn't talking.
Mm-hmm.
Those kinds of things where it's always, I wasn't doing that, or this or that. And it becomes this, in the olden days, the back talk. They don't talk back to me.
It's a power
they
struggle.
always,
Yeah.
And they always have something to say. I think nowadays kids always, and on one hand, good for you for sticking up for yourself, but also, I was looking at you. I have eyes and ears, and they work. But it's just a matter of, when it came to behavior, it became, how do I get this kid to want to pay attention without letting them walk all over me?
Yeah.
Because if you're too strict and too harsh, you won't have that rapport. Mm-hmm. You won't be able to build that trust where they want to listen to you. On the other hand, if you're just buddy, hey, call me Miss N, whatever.
Yeah.
It's not, they're going to walk all over you. You're never going to get anything accomplished. I lost my train of thought.
No, that's fine. I was going to jump in there and say, I think behavioral that I saw was, you were talking about the example of the kid that says, I wasn't talking. And I think what strikes me as, I don't know, in the last few years, maybe it wasn't at COVID, maybe it was starting to kind of creep before COVID, was a lack of self-accountability.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, that's the one thing that I can't stand, when I have to deal with a student's behavior and I adjust the behavior and I'm talking to them, privately, and I'm telling them, this is what I observed here, and here, and it's just excuse.
Yeah.
And it could be something as, as simple as, not turning in the assignment, or it could be talking, or it could be, whatever the behavior is. But that's one of those kind of life skills that I think teachers are held to a different standard, in the sense of, I could never tell my boss, I can't tell my principal, yeah, I was running late today. So what? It's okay.
Yeah.
Like, no.
Well, there was traffic.
Right. And the response would be, okay, well, we'll cover the class for a few minutes, but next time, make sure you leave early. The next day, traffic. Okay, well, Hugh, set an alarm, 15 minutes. Yeah, we're going to start documenting this, right? So it's the accountability piece that I think that we are trying to enforce, but we have no real, teeth to enforce it. And so it's this idea that we want to model this behavior because it's going to make you a productive citizen. It's going to make you a productive spouse, worker, or whatever. But it's that lack of, accountability on their part. And I mean, when you were talking about how you were trying to get them engaged, we're teaching, or I'm teaching Macbeth now, and Shakespeare. I mean, while I love Shakespeare, it's not something like I'm going to go put on Netflix like the latest. That's just not there. But we read in class or I play the audio because the language goes much faster if it's someone else, right? I've got the No Fear translations. I have on the digital side, I've got resources for the students that include the audio links, the No Fear links, as well as clips to summaries of scenes that we've covered in class. So as they come, they can, they can do it. And yet it's still the expectation when the kid comes in and says, well, I was out, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, well, it's all there for you. This is now on you. This is ownership of your education. Like, I've given you all of the resources. Whereas, like, when I think you or I in high school, we would have killed to have the amount of resources that are there. Like, if I were to tell a kid, like, hey, you could Spark Notes this, they would probably go, what is Spark Notes? Like, they would have no idea. And I even saw this in a class. It was an AP class, and they encountered a text, and they were to read it at home, and it was by John Stuart Mill. So like 19th century, it was an essay. So a lot of archaic language by our standards, philosophical topic about happiness, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was actually a day that I had an intern there, and I told the intern before, I said, watch, it's going to be very awkward because they probably didn't read it, and I'm just going to let them stew in silence. And they're like, okay. And sure enough, there was like one or two kids that actually had Googled and figured out like what the essay was about. And I'm like, It's that ownership capacity. It's like, okay, so I read a paragraph. There's only like 2 or 3 pages, but I read a paragraph. It wasn't interesting. It was too hard. So I just gave up. And that's the accountability piece that I'm trying to, one, as a teacher, say, well, you can't give up always, especially in a testing situation. You can't just say, I give up. I mean, you could, but the results are not going to be positive. But then relationally, as the adult in the room, I'm trying to say, guys, this is the least of the things in life that are really going to create problems for you. Every time that you just want to give up, you can't just give up.
Yeah. Which I think it kind of goes back to, like, are we creating a problem by having so many ways for them to, by having all those supports there for them? Were we able to push through it because we had no other choice but to do it? I've had that thought so many times of, we scaffold, we break things down, we put them into diagrams, all these digestible ways to get things across. And then when we put them to the test, as it were, as if we put them in a situation where they do need to encounter those things, are they able to, without our scaffolds, without our everything?
Right. There's a
which
phrase.
Why I think it's good to throw that at them every once in a while, give them something super meaty to chew at, and just be like, what do you got?
Yeah. There's a phrase called learned helplessness, which I was talking about in an earlier podcast. And I think we as an institution probably do more damage in this regard by having what we think are going to be scaffolds or ways to address any type of learning gap, which there may be some out there. But I think for the majority of students, if we could address the why they aren't motivated, and if we could just fix that component, which is kind of the fuzzy problem, then I think that would take care of a lot of the issues.
It would solve a lot of problems. Yeah, I think, and on my like as I was getting closer to the end of my career as a teacher, I had made a list of things that I think these are what could actually have kept me, kind of a thing. And I think in terms of things that need to be fixed about education, the accommodations, all of that kind of stuff is a big part of it, because, and I'm sure you can speak to this as a teacher who's been in it as long as me, but in 10 years, 11 years, every year I would get more and more 504s, more and more IEPs, more and more, what was the new one? There was 504 IEP, and then there was a new one, PMP students. Yeah. Students basically saying, this kid has an additional need. This kid has an additional need. This kid has an additional need. And I'm not saying that there are not kids who have those needs. Of course there are. But it's gotten to the point, and that almost every student has one of those. And it becomes literally impossible to meet all of those needs. So it needs to be rethought. There needs to be something. I don't have a solution for it necessarily, but I don't think anyone's really having the conversation of, this isn't working. Having these IEPs, having these 504s, it works before, but now so many students, I think just as a generation, we can all say, each of us has a learning disorder. Each of us has an attention disorder. Each of
Yeah.
us, it's
Well,
built into our
each of us
society.
learns differently, and
Yeah.
that's to be taken into consideration. But yeah, that's a great point on the accommodation piece, because for a while I did testing coordination at the
Mm.
school, and the amount of paperwork that would go in for accommodation, like College Board doesn't just take a district's word for it that this kid has a
Yeah.
504 or an IEP. Like, they require medical, you know, they
Wow.
require everything, the transcripts from the doctor, to do everything. So it's not just
Yeah.
as simple as telling College Board, like, hey, this kid needs extended time, just, wink wink nod nod, just pass them along.
Yeah.
It's very extensive. Whereas I think with the district, or districts more at the local level, I don't know if that burden is really there. I don't know if that burden is as much there, because we're so keen to make sure that they have the safeguards in place. And I
Yeah.
know that there's the legality issue, right? I know that they're also making
Yeah.
sure from a federal standpoint that the students' rights are protected. But I don't know if those accommodations, to what you're saying, have created learned helplessness in students, and they're not really taking the ownership of their own education. They're just kind of letting these accommodations protect them. Like, I've
Yeah.
had many conversations with parents about their IEP or 504 over a particular assignment, and a standard may address something, and they're trying to get the 504 to excuse the assignment because they don't like the assignment and the standard. And it's like, well, no.
It's
Like,
part of it.
your 504 or your IEP doesn't remove a standard. Like, you can't just go into geometry and be like, I've got a 504 or IEP, I don't need to learn shapes this year. Like, no,
Yeah.
we're going to teach you
Yeah.
shapes and geometry using the methods that work with you, but we can't just skip over fractions because you don't like it or it's too
Or your
hard.
brain doesn't work that way. It's like,
Yeah.
you gotta, that's why we're here, to figure out how to make it work that way. But yeah, I think, and I feel like, and I can only speak to my own experience, a lot of it had become, okay, well, the parent is saying this is a problem. It's easy enough to fill out this form to say they get additional time, so we'll just do that, and that should solve everything. And that's not the case. Like, how many, and it's not just additional time became way overused. Proximity seating. I
Small
remember
group.
trying to make, yeah, small group testing, small group everything, and it's like,
Yeah.
all of these things that I agree help cannot be put into action because our classes are too big, our teachers are stretched too thin, our resources, they keep taking resource teachers away. When we lost our ESE teachers, and then it seems like we're on the road to losing ESE teachers. Like, it's just, I think they need to seriously have a sit down and talk about it and be like, listen, what we're doing worked before, but it's not working now. It's not working for the kids, and it's not working for the system in general. But that's a huge conversation to have, because everyone goes, oh, so we just shouldn't have accommodations? No, but we got to address how it's working, because it's not.
Yeah.
So,
And I think go ahead.
No, I'm done.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, I think that's one of the goals of the podcast too, is to have an honest conversation with what do we want our schools and our kids to graduate with. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, the reality is you should have students in a high school, in a district, that unfortunately are not going to graduate. Now, you can work as hard as you can to incentivize and to remove the barriers for that student to be successful.
Yeah.
But if you're looking at it from a purely data standpoint, out of 1,500 kids, there should be someone that is not graduating, And I was reading an article about grade inflation at the Ivy Leagues and how this has trickled up to them.
God, no.
Yeah. And I think it was Yale was talking about how, I don't know, like 79 to 80% of their students had gotten A's, like over in a quarter. And some of the faculty were feeling pressure from those students that didn't get the A to get the A, because the idea was, well, I've worked really hard. I was probably the AP IB kid in high school. I got into an Ivy League school. I've never not earned an A before. I'm not starting now. And so it just has this idea, okay, well, if we really want the A to have merit, we have to understand the F is the consequence of that. You know, if we really want to have a graduation rate, then we have to assume that there's going to be someone that's just not going to be successful the way that this model is currently structured. And maybe we need to come up with multiple models. Maybe we need to, have different paths that are more readily accessible to students. So we redefine success. So maybe success is not, a graduation, you go to a 4-year university and you get $30,000 in debt and, all of this. Like, Congratulations, right?
The Game of Life always set us up for that. Because I was always like, who's going to go to college? The Game of Life? You ever play that? The board game?
Yeah.
In the beginning, it's like, who wants to go this extra way and get all this extra debt just so maybe you can get a better job? That's so stupid. And when I was a kid, that was like so dumb. And then I was like, oh, they were warning us. Don't do
Nelson Bradley, they knew it all along.
Nelson Bradley knew.
Sponsored by Pearson. Like, what?
Yeah, exactly.
It was sponsored by Navient. You're like, oh my God, it was all along.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that big picture, where we're at seems to be we're getting to a place where maybe we need to rethink the whole thing, and grades are not the way to do it. Maybe we need to go to some sort of a pass-fail. You've achieved this, you've achieved this, you've achieved this.
So I was reading another article and they had a college out west, and the name of it escapes me, but it was A, B, or C. And then after that, it was coded as no C, or NC rather, no credit. And so that way it wouldn't report negatively on the students' grades, but it would be something that they would tell the kid that they have to take it over. They have to do it over. Yeah.
But what's the point? Why do we even have the ABC system? Like,
I don't. Well, this. I think.
I mean, honestly, really think about it. Why do we have it? What's the point of having the ABC? Is it that down to you said this is what you want your podcast to be, the point of education. Why do we put ourselves and our kids into these categories and give them these ratings? What is its purpose? Is the idea of high school, is it to create an ideal citizen? To create factory workers? Is the idea to classify students to find out where they should go to meet their best potential? I mean, in an idyllic world, that would be kind of what high school is for, so that we can pinpoint where their strengths and weaknesses are so that they can become the best version of themselves. How does the ABC system serve that purpose? Because
that was Amanda Neff. Thank you for joining us. No, so Sir Ken Robinson, Do Schools Kill Creativity? Famous TED Talk, right? And I read behind his book, but the problem that I have with Robinson is he doesn't really come out with a solution for something as large as like the U.S., right? So like you can do charter schools, you can do these private schools, right?
You can homeschool.
You could homeschool, but that requires a different socioeconomic status for most people. That requires some level of skill or will on the part of the student, right? Some accountability on both the parents and the child at that point if you're going to be homeschooled or charter schooled.
There should be accountability on the parent, though, shouldn't there?
Or there should be accountability. Either way, across the spectrum.
You hear from me. Even if you put your kid in public school, you are still responsible for your kid's education and making sure they're getting one.
Yes, no, but I'm saying like even in a charter school, like there's accountability. So it's just, I don't know. what to replace
Sorry.
the grade system. No, I don't know what to replace the grade system, but I do understand what you're asking. Like, what are we getting out of the A? What are we trying to get out of? And that's my concern with raising a bunch of students who I have seen become more grade hungry, and they're not
And
mastery of content. And so
it's
there's
all a
a
point.
teacher.
It's a game. It's a point system. That's all they care
Yeah,
about. What's going to get
there's
the most points?
there was a teacher I used to work with. I think it was Kelly, and she used to say she would love it if the online grade book went away for a year.
Me, I said that.
Oh, it was you. That was you.
That was me.
That was you.
I said that. I
So,
said I would love to not have an online grade book anymore because they just
and,
wait to see if the number's going to change.
yeah, and I mean that's what I'm older than you, so you probably had it. But when I went to high school, oh okay, when I went to high school, we didn't, and there was one class, Mr. Palmer, and I would have to figure out what I was going to get on the next test to see, if I was going to be able to get a passing grade for the class, because I knew he had 10 quizzes every 2 weeks on, this material. And I had to do the math, and I wasn't good at math, but I could at least figure that part out. But I think that there's a danger, to your point and to what you're making, about the idea that we are raising kids to get the A, but not the knowledge behind it. And so that just has to trickle up to the Ivy Leagues, or colleges in general, who want a degree. And I try to tell my students this. I said, but don't you want a doctor that actually understands you, that just didn't Google the medicine? I mean, we all can go to a WebMD, and then I'm like, oh, yes. I have hysterical pregnancy. And then, that's where you want the doctor to go, well, actually, Mr. Herndon, you don't have hysterical pregnancy. You have a cough. Let's just knock it down to what you actually have. Just because you clicked something randomly on WebMD doesn't mean you have this. And so,
and that's the scary part of trickle down, is because it's going to, if it happens in the middle, then the high, then the regular college and grad school, then that means we're going to have doctors who have been pushed through and who are going to go to do open heart surgery but didn't really pass the class. And that's terrifying. So we have to take a step back and be like, are we doing this? I understand there's definitely an argument to be made that, kids who are pushed through high school but don't actually have the skills, some of them, it doesn't really make a huge difference, because no matter how long we kept them there, they were only going to achieve to a certain level. Mm-hmm. I've heard that point said, like, they're just wasting their time. Let's get them into the world so that they can work and find all those things. And I know you made the comment in the thing with Austin about how the stigma attached to vocational schools and, going straight to work, that's being eliminated, which is excellent. That's amazing. There are some students who, no matter what we do, high school is not their thing. Mm-hmm. For them, they need to just go out and live in the world, and that's going to be the best way to get them to where they're at. But if we push and push and push all students, and this grade inflation is the worst of it, is if we say, yes, this is an A student, sure, they've always been an A student, yeah, give them an A for everything, A, and they continue up the track of excellence, it's going to adversely affect society as a whole.
Well, and
my husband,
go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, my husband is a manager, and he talks all the time about these kids who come in to apply for jobs, but they're like, it'll be like, do you have a resume? I don't know how to do that. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, but it's on you to figure that out. You can't expect your employer to walk you through making a resume. Like, that's not how. So it trickles into the world when we keep pushing people through, but not actually having them meet the standards that they should be meeting.
Yeah, no, what I was going to say is the idea that passing them along or lenient grading, like, I don't know, like the minimum 50. I don't know if that was, if you were in that great, debacle, because, but for those that don't know, it's the idea that if a student does not turn an assignment in, that you would give them a 50%, let's say if it's out of 100, that you would give them a 50%, because they would only need 10% more to then pass. And so 50% is closer to passing than if you were to give them a 0, which then the 0 to 50 is mathematically incapable of redeeming it.
Yeah.
But I did have one teacher that actually brought up a good point, but I'm not asking them to master just 10% of my standards. I'm asking them to measure 60% of my standards. But if I do the 50, then I'm only actually asking them to master 10% of my standards. And I thought that was a good comeback to that.
It gets so nuanced, but
yeah,
there is an argument to say that a 0 has a crazy effect in a 100-point score. Like 1-0 can make a huge difference average wise. And it is crazy that, an A is a 90, an 80 or whatever. And then there's so much there that's nothing. Yeah. But also I can think of absolutely no justification for they didn't do it at all. Give them something. That should never be the case.
Well, I can't think of a real world example where
there is none.
Because despite my emails to the superintendent, I have yet to have them pay me for not showing up.
Yeah, it's rude.
I think that's unfair. But what I was going to say about the before about the inflation, but it also, I think, robs them psychologically of developing as a person. And so they go into your husband's employment and they think they are prepared and they feel good about themselves, right? I'm assuming to some degree they've made themselves presentable. They think that they have a chance when they don't have a chance because they don't have the resume, they don't have the skills, and yet we've inflated them to believe that they're at a capacity, at a stage that they're not. And Jordan Peterson talks about this, like as parents, we need to be hard on our children to the point where we understand, not hard to be mean or mean-spirited, but the world won't coddle them. The world won't look at them like we look at them. And so we have to prepare them for a world where they walk into a manager's office and they're like, I'd like a job. And they go, well, where's your resume? I don't know how to do this. Like, your husband may respond politely, right? Yeah. But there are a lot of individuals who would respond with, don't waste my time. And immediately that person just, their whole personality, their whole psychology just takes this tremendous hit. And we could have prevented that had we just encouraged them to hold some level of accountability throughout the experience.
And I mean, I'm not the first one to say that failure is the best teacher of all. And when you make a mistake, when it's big and impactful, it resonates and you remember it more and you retain it more. And when we have parents and administration or whoever it is saying, hey, it's not fair that this kid is penalized because blah, 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 blah. Please give them an A or give them a this or whatever it is. It destroys that lesson. I remember one of the biggest projects that in our theater classes we would do is our film projects, and it's a group project. And if you've ever had your students do a group project, you know that it's unending drama. And parents will get upset once grades come out saying, oh, well, this kid did that. Why does it affect my kid's grade and all that kind of stuff? But that, in my opinion, is the most important kind of project that kids need to learn how to do in high school, in the comfort and security and safety net of a high school environment. Because when you get into the real world, you will have to work with other people. And other people will let you down. And you have to learn how to cope with that and how to overcome with that. And you have to decide, if I want it to be an A, I need to do more. And no, it's not fair that Jimmy sucks. What have you done to get Jimmy out of your group or to help Jimmy or whatever it might be? Like the conflicts conflict management
Yeah.
is a skill that I feel like doesn't get addressed nearly enough because we're so afraid of it, because we would rather not upset parents, because we would rather not have, all this backlash, and because it's hard conversations.
Mm-hmm.
But that is the most meaningful lessons that we can give our kids, is that conflict management, that, okay, you failed this test. What are we going to do about it? Instead of, well, here, just retake it. It's like, no, you failed this test. So now how are we going to recover? Because life goes on. How do we recover?
The conflict management, the conflict resolution, I think that that is invaluable for people to, especially for students, to understand that there are consequences to it. Yeah. And conflict's not always bad. Conflict is not always bad. But to your point, like I've had major projects where the student has just actively refused. Information has been, presented to the parent as that. And at the end of the project, then they come back and go, well, what is the alternative assignment? And I'm going, there is no alternative assignment. Like this is something that we've been working on. And I teach a class now where they, AP seminar, where they have to work in groups. And we spent a lot of time, because College Board grades them all as a group. That's part of their grade as well, which many times in high school setting, you as the teacher, at least I try to, as much as possible, not do the group grade, but do an individual component of the group grade, because it just gets really, really fuzzy when kids are not there. And how do you hold people accountable when they're not there? And, and to your point, you say, well, Jimmy, what are we going to do in Jimmy's absence? And then you're in parent-teacher conferences because, my kid's working more because Jimmy's not there, and I can't hold Jimmy accountable and stuff. Well, College Board is like, no, you all are working as a group. So if someone decides not to pull their weight, then your grade as a whole reflects that. And so we had to work on that and practice. Okay, so what happens when a team member is not there? What happens when, you need to hold them accountable? How do you do that? What's the protocol for, talking it out directly, and it's awkward for them to practice this, but it's good life skills, because we're all going to have that conversation, or someone's going to have that conversation with us, and they're going to go, Hugh, I told you this was due yesterday. It's not done. So what's the answer? Yeah. And they're not looking for an excuse. They're not looking that, my kid was sick or I ran into traffic. They're looking for the resolution that they need, which is, I'll get it done now. And, I'm sorry, there's some accountability. I should have done it.
Yeah. We would workshop problems. It was super fun. Again, these were theater classes, not English, but I think that they should be done in English class anyway, because they're super fun. But we would workshop things like, okay, your group, you've shown up to film for the day, and Josie was supposed to bring the camera and she didn't, but you've driven an hour and you're at the beach. What do you do? Yeah. Because you're supposed to film today, and they have to work it out and figure out, what would they do? Oh, well, why don't we film this on our phones for now? Oh,
yeah. Like, that's also good problem solving.
Yeah. Exactly. And they don't, because so many of them, how many times have you had kids who are like, well, we were supposed to stay after school to work on a project, but then so-and-so didn't show up. It's like, but two of you were there? Did the two of you get anything done? Well, no, because the third guy wasn't there. It's like,
yeah,
problem solving. Anyway, I'm getting off on tangents, but I think there's something to all of that, to the grading system being no longer relevant, it has no integrity anymore. I still get blown away too with the GPAs of valedictorians being in the 7.0s. How does that even happen? It doesn't make any sense to me.
Which is funny, because most colleges will reduce those honor points, those extra points anyway. So it goes back to 4.0. So it's like, okay, you killed yourself and you got a 7.8. It's just, they're going to look at it as a 4.0. So.
But I mean, what is it going to take for education to those and I'm sorry, because you started this talking about like, what are the big things that we don't have like we can't
Yeah.
fix that. Like that's a huge institutional change to change how
Oh,
the
yeah.
grade system works and how all those other things.
Because I think
But
that's to some degree why we have so many different tests. Like every few years, there's a new test. It's because we don't want to be accountable with the actual results, because
yeah.
then that would show the system in its deficit. Like we understand it's bad. We have an idea. I think those that are involved at some level with education, we have an idea of what education the results are. But if we had one consistent test for like 10 or 15 years, then we'd see all the data and we're like, oh, okay, it's really that bad, you know? Like I didn't. It's like looking at your budget, you know, like before you go shopping, you know.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that's actually how much I have. Okay, well then, perhaps I'll refrain.
That's honestly, as bleak as that is, that's a much more maybe not optimistic, but a much more like positive viewpoint. My viewpoint of why do we have so much testing is because there's money in it.
Oh no, I completely agree on that. But I'm saying if we had the same test, I think people would be able to see through the mist and through it. I know we're wrapping up. I just had a couple points to.
Yeah, sorry.
No, that's fine. Another thing about you were talking about education and big picture and what it would take, and I've said jokingly, but I think it's going to take the collapse of the system itself. And I think to some degree we are looking at. I think COVID shook some institutions when they said, let's get rid of the SAT. And that didn't take too long for it to kind of come back into it. But people are, I think there was a New York Post article that just came out that said, is the SAT even like, you know, what's the relevancy of the SAT, right? Yeah. And I think it's going to take that, because once we have a collapse of the system, or enough of it is shaken to its core, then people are either going to see the need for it. They're going to see, okay, so I don't have the capacity to teach my kids. I can't afford this. Like, I need them to be educated, you know, to be productive citizens. You know, this is what separates us from developing nations, is a system in place for our children so that they can be, you know, so they can be functioning.
But yeah, it's funny too to go from I like I said, I wanted to be a public school teacher. I became a public school teacher. I was a public school teacher. And then it got to the point where not only have I quit teaching, but I don't want my son to go to public schools. Mm-hmm. So I believe in the idea of public education, but I don't want my son to be a part of it, because I don't think it's doing what it's supposed to. So yeah, it's to me, it's already broken, but it's not broken to the point where the society sees it as broken, and so we can fix it.
Yeah. If you had one final piece of advice for those that are going into the profession now that you've exited, let's try it on a somewhat positive. Although I've loved the conversation, because we have to have these frank conversations. We have to have honest conversations. That's probably why I hate most teaching movies, to be honest with you, is because it is so unrealistic. Because it's one person that in that right circumstance made the change. It could be based on a true story, but not everyone's Ron Clark. Not everyone's going to have the administrative support that you have. And so to some degree, that's why I like Dead Poet Society, because at the very end, what happens to the good teacher? He's fired because he rebels, right? Because he rebels, he pushes against the system, because he won't go with their lesson plans, their curriculum, their format, right?
And at the end of Dangerous Minds, she was going to quit because it was too hard, but they convinced her to come back because she has a big heart.
And she teaches them what, karate, or
she teaches them kung fu.
Kung fu, yes, kung fu. All right, yeah.
Because she was a Marine. I know a lot about that movie.
Yeah. So, what would be your one? What would be your? Good Lord, the post editing on this is going to take me forever. Okay, what would be
I apologize.
What would be the one piece of advice that you have for teachers that are going into the profession?
This is hard. I think I'm trying to think of, like, if I could go back in time and talk to myself, what would I say? Obviously I made what?
I was going to let me caveat this that I also don't think I think it's okay for people to leave education. Like I don't think it. Like I think in like Vietnam and some of the earlier wars, you had like so many points as a soldier you earned, and then you could kind of like rotate out. I wonder if we had that in society. We're like, okay, it's like selective service for everyone. You know, like you have to go into public education for like 5 years, and it's like, gotta do my duty for America. You know, and then after 5 years, you know, you get the
I served
form,
my
you know?
time.
I served my time. It's like MASH, you know, it's like, I got the form, I'm going home, you know, and everyone's happy for you. So I don't think it's bad that you leave or that individuals leave education, because I think that you can burn out. And I think professionally, personally, like you know, you can just go, you know what, I'm great at this, but I want something more for my life.
And you know what's funny? Because a big reason why teachers don't leave the classroom is that guilt, is that I don't want to abandon my kids. I don't want to abandon my coworkers, that, you know, that stigma attached to quitting. Of course, it's fine that you quit teaching, Hugh. There's nothing wrong with quitting your career and finding another one.
And they will replace you in a second.
Exactly.
I mean, we think in your head that, you know, when you go out that there's going to be like this slow clap, you know, like flags going to be half mast, you know, there's going to be a board of education meeting to like rename a school. It's like, we already got you someone, you know, we already got your replacement hired.
I thought so many, you know, I thought I would be, you know, people, they'd be upset that I quit, and they'd be like, oh my God, I can't believe you made that choice, whatever. What I got instead was so many people saying, I'm so happy for you that you made this choice, and that is the right thing. Former students of mine saying, you made such a change in my life. I'm so glad that you're finally getting to do something, you know, getting to have the life you deserve to have, kind of a thing. Like even they could recognize that this was the positive step for me, and not anyway. Okay, back to the advice. You're gonna have to cut all of that out. Advice. So I
don't have the skills for that. It's all going.
I was gonna say, at least I haven't used any foul language yet. I don't know.
That's for the subscribers only. So.
Here's my Patreon.
Behind the paywall. There you go.
Behind the paywall. Teacher mentor podcast after dark. Anyway, I think honestly what I would say going into it is, because if you want to be a teacher, if you're really getting into it and you're going to do it, I am assuming, and I know it's not always the case, but assuming that you're in it for the right reasons, that you want it because you want to make a difference, because you want to, it's a service that you're providing, and it's going to take everything. My advice is remind yourself that it is a job, and that you deserve to treat it as such.
Yeah.
Everyone says teaching is a calling, and I get it. And it takes a certain kind of person to be able to be a teacher, but that doesn't change the fact that it's a job. And so when we constantly have to remind ourselves not to work off the clock and everything like that, you're going to have to let things slide. You're not going to be able to do all the things that you should be able to do, because you know they're right. And you have to give yourself grace that you've done what you can. It's never going to be perfect. Make the connections. Let them learn one thing, and you will have made a positive impact. But it's a job. And I
like that. No, that's good. And I'll end there, because I mean, that's one thing that I told one of my mentors that actually went into education for a while and has left, is I would literally take things from her bag and say, no, it's a job.
Yes.
When the job is over, the job's over. And that's perfect. Don't feel guilty for that. Well, thank you, Amanda, for joining us. We'd love to have you back.
I think we need 12 more episodes just to discuss the things we stopped talking about in this one. So, sorry.
Season 2. So, just kidding. All right. This is it. All right. Thank you, Amanda. And we will talk to you later. All right.